I'm Judah. I'm 60, and I'm a writer. I'm 60, and I'm a writer. I'm 60, and I'm a writer? For the last several years, I've been wiped out, exhausted. Is this my life in middle age? If that's true, what do I have to look forward to in my 60s? The sudden drop of energy, going from 60 to 0 in the space of a few years, didn't feel like normal aging, but when have I ever been normal? I went from one doctor to another. Those doctors said I had low thyroid and almost no vitamin D. I gobbled pills, capsules, supplements, all for naught. Was I blue? Well, waking up at 7 a.m. exhausted after wrestling with my pillow all night and losing was depressing. One day I stumbled upon an article about sleep apnea on the internet. Fatigue, low mood, waking up at night gasping for air, check, check, and check. You see, once or twice a month I'd wake up gasping, my heart pounding. I wrote it down to nerves. After all, sleep apnea was the domain of overweight snorers, and I was neither. Well, one day last fall, I finally went over to Mount Auburn Hospital, where they fit me with a small device designed to measure my heart rate, oxygen level, and the number of times I stopped breathing during the night. 2 weeks later, I got my report. I stopped breathing 56 times during the 7 hours I was on the monitor, and my oxygen level dropped to 85%. Now, anything below 90 is considered dangerous. Being both a researcher and a hypochondriac, I panicked when I discovered I was at risk for minor medical events like a heart attack, a stroke, or sudden death. This was my life in middle age, a betrayal of the body. Now, the gold standard treatment is a CPAP machine, a helpful device about the size of a loaf of bread, complete with control panel, hose, and mask. The sleep technician told me that the device would take a little getting used to, but that getting my apnea under control was vital, because every time I stopped breathing, it put a strain on my heart. Bad news in a family where the men tend to die from heart disease. But there was one problem. With the mask and hose, I could only sleep in one position, on my back. And that led to a second problem. I can't sleep on my back. I sleep on my stomach or on my side, not splayed out on my back with a hose forcing air down my throat. Well, over the course of Christmas break, I tried one mask and then another. The first was small, light, and fit over my nose with plugs that went into each nostril. But those nostrils were congested. And just after I finally fell asleep, my mouth opened and I was blasted with air, which woke me up. So I tried a full face mask, well designed for scuba diving, if not for sleep. When I first saw the mask, I thought, what will this do to my already non-existent social life? And do sleep apnea sufferers only date each other? Would I be consigned to a subculture of gay apneiacs? Wasn't being gay, Jewish, hard of hearing, and from Cleveland enough? Now, when I got my report, I was told that apnea was a serious disease and that compliance in using my machine was very important. Each night my machine would send off my data to the technicians at the hospital so that if I didn't use the machine regularly, my insurance company would refuse to pay and my CPAP would be repossessed. But after a few nights, it became clear that I couldn't sleep with the damn thing. Back to the drawing board. Back to the internet for more research. Well, after a 3-month wait, I got in to see a dentist who fit me with a mouthpiece or oral device, a hard plastic retainer which moves my teeth and lower jaw forward so that I look a bit more like the Neanderthal I am. I wear it nightly, drooling and salivating like one of Pavlov's dogs, but my throat is open and I can breathe better. Now, if I could just digest my food and poop naturally, my life would be complete. Why do I write? Writing is for me both physically and emotionally painful. An anxious, restless man, I find sitting for more than 15 minutes to be extremely difficult. The physical act of writing, my body hunched over a notebook or tense over laptop, leads to backaches, a stiff neck, a tight gut. Am I whining? I'm told that Ernest Hemingway wrote standing up. How would Ernest view my unwillingness to face the blank page? What a wimp, he'd mutter. How does that compare to staring down a leering lion or a raging rhinoceros? Is this chapter 4 or chapter 5? What do I call this stage of life I'm entering in which I'm giving up steady work I don't like for the gift of time? A gift or a curse? It depends on how I handle semi-retirement, working part-time, or whatever I choose to call it. You see, at 60, my clock is ticking, as it was at 50, but now the ticks are louder in my bad ears, and the years to come are finite. A precious resource, like water in the Southwest. You see, I was born in the late 1950s, the expansive peak of the baby boom, and now we are skittering toward old age, kicking and screaming the whole way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. As a young man, a boy really, I memorized Dylan Thomas's poem for my Introduction to Sign Language course at Northwestern University. I was 20, and like a trained parrot, I echoed Thomas's words without really grasping their meaning. I mean, what did I know of death or life at 20? Today, I know a lot more and have no illusions about where this train is heading, though I don't really want to look. Still, I'm lucky to have now, today, to be productive, creative, inspired, or so I hope. And I still want a boyfriend, but that doesn't sound like the right term for a 50 or 60-year-old man. Companion might be better, but that sounds like we would hold hands and sleep in separate beds like the married couple in a 60s sitcom. I will not go gentle into that good night and don't want to think about that for a while. But now, today, at dusk, I wonder who or what comes next. I'm Judah. I'm 60. I'm a writer. Why do I write? The physical pain pales before the emotional upset of rooting around in my unhappy childhood. My childhood danced with depression, which lasted till I was past 40. The depression, not my childhood, led me to unhappiness, or did the unhappiness lead me to depression? Why do I write? My writing career is as follows. A column in the local gay newspaper, which pays me enough for dinner and a movie for one. A self-published book that took me 10 years to write and sold 900 copies. Public radio pieces for which I was paid nada, zero, zilch. It's 4 days before my show. The first time in my life I've ever gone totally off the page, just me alone on stage, and it's not Symphony Hall, but the Cambridge, Massachusetts Center for Adult Education. But 60 people have bought tickets, and I don't want to suck to bore them or embarrass myself. Now, this, telling pieces of my life story as if someone might care, is something I've wanted to do since I was 4 years old, when there wasn't much to tell. Back then, I felt worthy of others' time and attention. I mean, after all, my grandmother, Nanny Frida, said I was a talented little boy, a wonderful singer and dancer. I mean, who was I to doubt her? But over time, I lost that confidence, replacing it with frustration and envy when I watched others living out their creative dreams, and mine moldered, decaying like a moth-eaten sweater. Well, now, after decades of procrastination, I am finally moving forward. I've been working toward this moment in fits and starts for years, rehearsing for the past 4 months, memorizing, timing, blocking myself on stage. Now, my show is a low-tech production with a cast of 1 and a crew, including my director Adam, who's handling the lights, and another friend who is doing sound, of 2. Adam and I are heading toward Harvard Square, where soon, God willing, I'll do my show. Now, I don't have a budget or a real set, but thanks to Adam, I have 4 flats made of muslin, stretched canvas over wood, painted to resemble a city skyline. They're property of his community theater troupe in Wakefield, north of Boston. Now, we're transporting them on the roof of Adam's car, a mid-size Subaru, a hair too small to fit the 8-foot-high by 4-foot-wide flats. But Adam has a plan, which involves lashing the flats to the car's luggage rack, snaking rope through the front windows, and covering the whole thing with a plastic tarp. Protection from the dark sky, which is spitting a misty rain. I follow Adam slowly down residential streets, and a tarp flies away. But the weather holds, at least for now, and we turn onto Interstate 93, going 35, 45, 55 miles an hour. I'm several car lengths behind him for safety, anxious to get to the center, where we have the space for just a few hours before another group takes over. Then the flats, a rectangular clump on the Subaru's roof, start to shift. And I think about calling Adam on my cell, but then it's too late. The flats are airborne, spinning, crashing back to earth. I slam on my brakes and pull over to the side of the highway. Adam pulls over too, and we watch open-mouthed as a series of vehicles swerve toward us, trying and sometimes failing to avoid the flats. Then a big truck, a 16-wheeler, pulls up, stops, and puts on his flashers, which gives Adam and me a chance to run out on Interstate 93, grab the flats, and run back to the safety of the guardrail. I look at Adam. He looks at me. Screw it, he says, and we pitch the flats, 2 still intact and 2 crushed through, over the guardrail and jump back in our cars. Well, back at the center, we piece together a set, black curtains, and 2 Japanese screens I find in a storage space. Then we run a rehearsal, and in one scene, I forget to put on my pants, showing up in my red boxers and black socks. The next day goes a little better, but I still flub several lines. I've memorized, repeated, chanted these stories like a mantra for 2 months, then 4, until I know them all by heart, until I am sick of them. And now I am strangely calm, given that the show has sold out and 70 people are coming to see me on this very night. It's a Saturday morning in November, mild and clear, and I'm counting down hours, minutes, seconds, and I am relaxed, detached. And this is not me. Or have I, after 2 decades of therapy, really changed? But then it's lunchtime, and I'm trying not to think about it, but I've got too much time, energy, thoughts, and this self-destructive voice that is woven into my mind, heart, solar plexus screams in my ear until I give in. What gives you the right to do a show? How self-indulgent. What have you done in your 50-plus years on this planet that gives you the right to take up space? My show is about striving for love, sex, self-acceptance, of wanting but of not quite getting, and where's the drama in that? This is bad mind, evil mind, my inner critic snickering that I am not enough, will never be enough, and why don't I get back in my shoebox and close the lid? And then I'm standing in a drafty hallway outside the stage door, and I hear the hum of the crowd. People who are there to see me, and it's 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes till showtime. And my director says, "Whenever you're ready." And I walk in, and I'm blinded by the light, can't see past the third row, but my body knows what to do, what to say, how to move. Words flow off my tongue, and I'm lifted by laughter, silence, a sense that I am not alone, and the critic is strangely quiet, at least for now. And then I'm changing behind one of those Japanese screens I found after my scenery died on Interstate 93, and I checked the set list, and there's just one story left. Did I forget something? But no, 45 minutes compressed into 5, because I'm in the zone, 4 years old, performing for my grandmother. And I know in that moment that I want more, that I need to do this again, and that this is the only story I can tell, the story of a life not of great triumphs and tragedies, but simply of one man doing the best he can, or the best he knows how, which is almost the same thing. I invite a man home for the first time. Let's call him Sven. He's Swedish, and we've been out twice before because I'm shy, and I'm not that easy, especially when it comes to sex, and I want to get to know him first. And now we're going to do it, and I've invited him to spend the night. Picture him, my sexy, earthy, hunky date. He's lean, muscled, sapphire eyes and golden hair, a killer smile. He's 45, but likes older guys, fit older guys like me. He pulls me in for a kiss, sucks my tongue, licks my chest, his cool Scandinavian breath merging with mine as he pins me down against the bed, twisting my body into a series of foreign shapes, a new form of partner yoga. I worship him as the minutes become hours until our bodies are spent and we unwind into two separate selves. He flashes his dentine smile, which leads to a final kiss, and then I reach out to pull my nightstand closer. It's where I store my gear, tackle, equipment. Picture him as he scans my nightstand, as he takes in the devices I need to breathe, to sleep, to make it through the night, his luscious lips, a soft circle of surprise. Here are the tools of my trade. A CPAP about the size of a loaf of bread, complete with control panel, hose, and mask. A mouthpiece or oral device, which moves my teeth and jaw forward through the night so I can breathe. Eye wash for my dry eyes, gel for my dry eyes, and sleep mask to keep eye wash and gel in dry eyes. Nasal strip to promote breathing, and antidepressant medication to knock me out so I can sleep through the night. Picture him as he pulls on his boxer briefs, shakes his blonde head, and mumbles something about an early morning meeting, a doctor's appointment, a fire sale. So Sven, how do you like me now? How do you say CPAP in Swedish? I'm too sexy for my CPAP, too sexy for my mouth strip, too sexy for my nose strip, too sexy for my gel. It was all a dream, sort of like when Bobby Ewing woke up on Dallas and he wasn't really dead. It had all been a bad dream, or in my case, a good one, until Sven left me bereft, even in my own fantasy. I'm Judah, I'm 60, and I'm a writer. I'm driving back from Rochester, New York, and the first time I've been sponsored by an actual theater, even if it is a small one. The multi-use cultural community center called Muck by Insiders offered me one night in their black box theater in a converted Baptist church. even though I had no idea how or even if I would draw an audience, I didn't want to pass up this chance to take my show on the road and tell my stories in a new city. Well, now, driving back from Rochester to Boston on the New York Thruway on a Sunday afternoon, I wonder if I've made a mistake. You see, maybe the idea of taking the show on the road was cool, but the reality was more problematic. See, a few days earlier, driving out from Boston to Rochester, I'd fallen into a serious funk with only the chatter of my mind for company. As I drove, I reflected on the fact that I was solo, single, without a boyfriend, partner, lover, and that I was getting old, in late middle age. My critics snickered that I was solo, single, a loser, who would never find a partner who would stick around. The Thruway, a flat, drab ribbon of highway, stretched before me, and I wondered why I'd agreed to travel 400 miles to perform in a dark theater for a bunch of people I didn't know. Still, I managed to hold off a deeper funk once I got to Rochester. You see, I had a technical rehearsal and then half a day to explore the city, which looked really nice on a sunny day in June. So here's the scene on that Saturday night. It's about 15 minutes before showtime, and I'm not too nervous. I've done the show before. When I look into the dark space of the theater, black floor, black walls, black chairs, and no people. And the box office has sold only 3 tickets. But then a group of about 10 people trickle in, half of them connected with the theater, and I spring into action. Now, the stage lights are in my eyes, so I can't see my audience, so I have to depend on sound, laughter, applause, breathing, to know that they're awake, engaged, alive, not fast asleep, bored, or dead. But no sound comes from the audience. I'm cut off from them by the glare and can't see past the second row, in which sits an older man. Short dark hair, round face, mustache, and what looks like a scowl as if he just sucked on a lemon or was enduring something painful like a root canal. Now, I had 2 friends in the audience, one from Toronto and one from Syracuse, and they must be enjoying the show more than this old guy who was holding on, white-knuckling it through my show. Well, I pull myself back to the present. We're on to stories number 2, 3, 4, and I'm moving props and changing clothes, and I forget about old Stoneface. And then the lights come up, and the audience is applauding loudly. One of Muck's directors tells me how much he enjoyed the show, and I go out with my 2 friends on a wave of good feeling, knowing that I slayed the crowd, or at least kept them awake. Well, by the next afternoon, I'm anxious to get home. I jump on the New York Thruway and head east, zipping along at 75 miles an hour, when I come upon one of those electronic billboards which says, "The Thruway is closed due to an accident. All lanes are blocked. We are to seek alternate routes." I know no alternate routes. For the next 2 hours, I circle Syracuse looking for a way out. Eventually, I end up on a 2-lane highway which takes me through rolling countryside, which might be nice if I weren't desperately trying to get the hell out of New York State. Well, finally, I wind back to the Thruway, which has reopened in my absence, and speed toward Boston, arriving home exhausted at 11 p.m. Checking my email before bed, my eye is caught by the subject line, "Deception," in all caps. It seems that one of my fans has flamed me, upset that my show, which was called One Man's Journey Through the Middle Ages, was not about the historical Middle Ages, which they helpfully defined as a period between 1000 and 1200 AD. Evidently, they were expecting a humorous tour through the Black Plague, the Dark Ages, and other knee slappers. Well, I figure out by process of elimination that my correspondent was the older man in the second row, the one who looked like he just sucked on a lemon. Now, even though he admitted to not having read anything about the show on flyer or website, I was at fault for taking his money, all $10, and was a, quote, deceptive, clever Jew. Now, I am a clever Jew, but I don't think he meant that as a compliment. I forwarded the email to Muck's directors, one of whom responded, "That's like expecting Gone with the Wind to be about the weather." Well, despite my low turnout and my anti-Semitic fan, I returned to Rochester and to Muck 3 months later as part of the Rochester Fringe Festival. There were many shows going on in town, but I drew 25 people on a rainy afternoon. They laughed, sighed, and applauded. I didn't see the bitter man from the previous June. Still, he occupies a place in my mind's eye where he sits in the second row, conferring with my inner critic. I wanted knights in shining armor, narrative drive, dramatic tension, damsels in distress. He's not an actor. It's not historically accurate. It's all been done before. He's not very funny. I tried to tell him. I'm Judah, I'm 60, and I'm a writer. Why do I write? Because I cannot sing, draw, or play a musical instrument. Because I am a damn good dancer. But who wants to watch a middle-aged white man dance? Because I want to tell stories, and unlike James Fry, I lack the imagination to make stuff up. Why do I write? Because going back to my childhood, the scene of the crimes, the busted hip, razored arm, twisted gut, I find some humor among the wreckage. Telling stories from my point of view, the adult inserted into the frame, I realized I came out the other side, even if it took me 50 years to do so. One morning, about 15 years ago, at the end of a long winter, I answered the phone and had to switch the receiver to my right ear. My left felt plugged up, as if I were on a plane. Weeks and then months went by while I waited for things to return to normal, which they never did. So eventually, I made an appointment with an ear, nose, and throat specialist who gave me a hearing test. Sitting in a soundproof booth, I raised my hands in response to a series of beeping tones. But there were long periods of silence while I strained to catch those faint beeps. Now, the irony of all this was not lost on me. You see, 25 years earlier, I earned my undergrad degree in deaf education. I taught deaf children and later worked as a sign language interpreter. As a boy, I felt a deep connection with my uncle Jerry, who was born deaf. Now, looking back, I realize it was because we were both different. Jerry visibly, while I felt like an outsider on the inside, growing up gay. See, as a gay kid, I could relate to my uncle, even though I felt different inside. As a boy, I looked up to Jerry, who was full of stories about his experiences being the only deaf kid on the Cleveland Heights High School basketball team. But at home, Jerry's father, my grandfather, who he called Papa Ben, spoke to my uncle, who was by then almost 40 years old, as if he were a boy. How many times have I told you? We've been over all this before. Why do I have to explain everything to you over and over again? Years later, I realized that Jerry probably missed a lot of what my grandfather said. You see, Papa wore a mustache, which made lip reading almost impossible. I understood, too, my grandfather's frustration in having a deaf son who would never be the boy or man my grandfather really wanted. When I was a senior in high school, I visited some classes for deaf children and saw for the first time little boys and girls signing, their fingers flying, much too fast for me to follow. Still, I was transfixed by the visual dance and wanted to learn their secret language. But I never saw Jerry sign. By then, he was married to his second wife, a volatile, dark-haired hearing woman who looked a lot like his first wife, who was deaf. But even with his first wife, who signed, my uncle didn't. Sometimes holding his own hands, restraining himself, as his teachers had done years earlier. You see, Jerry's oral method teachers taught him that sign wasn't a language, but a series of crass, animal-like gestures unfit for human consumption. Jerry used his voice instead, but his speech was harsh and dissonant. By then, he was working as a draftman's assistant, limited by the education he'd gotten from those same teachers who taught him to speak, but little else. I don't remember if I told him about my plans to teach deaf kids, but a few months later, just before I graduated from high school, Jerry died of a heart attack at 44. So all those years later in the specialist's office, I looked over at my audiogram and knew that something was wrong. The doctor didn't seem too concerned. Dr. Blase said I probably had an inner ear virus. If you come in sooner, we would have given you steroids, but now it's too late. Come back in a year and we'll fit you with a hearing aid. I walked out of his office feeling dizzy, ungrounded. I went to a second doctor. That doctor said he thought one of the tiny bones in my middle ear had stopped working. Surgery might ease the problem, but I'd never have normal hearing in my left ear, so I chose the least invasive option, a hearing aid. I made frequent trips to the audiologist, a honey-voiced southern blonde who fit me with one hearing aid, then a second, and then a third. The first two were fit right in my ear and were almost invisible, but in crowded spaces they would wail, which frustrated me. So eventually I got a behind-the-ear aid with a visible coil, a symbol of the aging process. Still, it takes getting used to. I remove it in the rain, with wind, at the gym. As the audiologist told me on one visit, not a day will go by when you don't think about your hearing for the rest of your life. Turns out she was right. I worry about batteries, earwax, and losing the aid on a daily basis. I go to movies and into restaurants and strain to catch what I can't quite hear. And I think of Jerry when I, as a boy who couldn't quite fit in, watched my uncle try to satisfy my grandfather, try to be normal, try to be like a hearing person, but he couldn't do it any more than I, as a boy, could give up my fantasies of the high school jocks and their lean athletic bodies. You see, Jerry was my uncle, and his deafness was part of him, like his big hands and long fingers, which lifted me up into the air when I was a boy and squeezed a bit too hard, as if to convey the connection between us, which was unspoken, because I was just a boy, and Jerry couldn't express his feelings through the strange puzzle of English. Remember one night in the fall of 1974, my brother Alex had his bar mitzvah, followed by a big party for family and friends with dinner and a band. I knew that Jerry loved to dance. He could feel the rhythm pulse through his size 13 shoes, and on this night, as he guided his second wife to the dance floor, my uncle was radiant. They danced together, hips rocking side to side, fingers snapping, my uncle's black shoes shining, and as the band launched into Aretha's R-E-S-P-E-C-T, taking care of TCB, my uncle was with them, getting down, rocking out, and no one could tell him that he was not whole, not full, not right for this one night. 6 months later, he was dead. Today, I think of Jerry, the price he paid for being different, and the echoes between my life and his, which continue today, 45 years after his death. The Massachusetts Eye and Ear Infirmary is a maze of offices, reception desks, examination rooms. I've been there the previous year for my chronic dry eyes, for which there seems to be no effective treatment. Well, now I'm back for another intractable condition. The frustration and indignity of losing the hearing in my left ear, which has left me struggling to capture words, to locate sound. After 10 years of life as a hard of hearing man, in which I learned to use a hearing aid and then gave up because it did little to no good, I'm back waiting to meet with a renowned surgeon who operated on a friend of mine and brought back most of his hearing. But my hearing loss is complex, a combination of middle and inner ear. I know there's no miracle cure. Still, I'm hoping that surgery might help me get back some of what I've lost. I wander back through the second floor maze to audiology, where I meet a young woman who introduces herself as Dr. So-and-so and asks me why I'm there. I give her a quick rundown. Sudden hearing loss in my left ear, unknown origin, little benefit and much frustration with my hearing aid, and my reliance on my good right ear. Then she tests my hearing, and she puts a clamp along the left side of my skull to measure something called bone conduction, to see if my auditory nerve and inner ear are still working. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm hearing something or if I'm feeling the physical weight of those faint beeps. Back in college, where I majored in deaf education, I took courses in acoustics, the physics of sound, and introduction to audiology, promptly forgetting most of what I learned. You see, I was going to teach deaf children using sign language, and though those children, some of them would be wearing hearing aids, that wasn't my area of interest. Well, now I was on the other side of that equation, not deaf, not fully hearing. The test goes on with something called speech recognition, a man in a monotone saying, "You will say arm, arm, you will say boat, boat." But even though those words are blasting into my left ear at 110 decibels, louder even than the red line train when it screeches into Davis Square Station in Somerville, I miss one word and then another, and there are 20 words, 50, what feels like 100, and I am sweating through my shirt, exhausted. I sit and wait for my audiogram, that graph with its collapsing lines of X's and O's, which tell me what I already know, that I am defective, my warranty is up, and I cannot complain to the manufacturer. The surgeon, an Asian American man of about 40 who was running 90 minutes late, comes in, issues a brisk apology, glances at my audiogram, and tells me what I want to hear, sort of. He said, it's a mechanical problem, explaining that depending on what he finds, he could replace one of the tiny bones in my middle ear with a prosthetic and restore some of my hearing. The fix is possible, he says, because my auditory nerve is barely hanging on. But restoring the connection will not cure your disease. I never thought of this as a disease. Well, it is, he says, with the bluntness of a surgeon who is running 90 minutes late. It's all about connection. I want to hear, speak, take up space, get my mind and body in working order before they fall apart. Everything falls apart sooner or later. I can't hear, I can't breathe at night. My eyes are dry and gritty, my own inland desert. The doctors know so little but say so much, propose solutions that don't work. My normal eyes, ears, breath, I took them all for granted. It's like Joni Mitchell saying back in the 60s, you don't know what you got till it's gone. I will cover my nose and mouth, suck air greedily into my lungs, try to sustain myself. Air is free, I tell my students. Get it while you can. Or maybe not, I would tell them now. It comes delivered through a plastic tube, inflating and deflating through the night. I am tethered to it, mechanical man. My eyes, ears, breath are imperfect and barely hanging on. I'm suspended between youth and old age, trying to hold on to what I've got. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? Why do I write? Because I'm middle-aged and time passes like a bullet train racing through the French countryside. Because a producer, a reader, an editor told me they could relate. Because I'm lonely, self-absorbed, staring at my navel. Why do I write? Because, like Dorothy Parker, I hate writing, but love having written in those rare moments when something I've written is actually worth reading. Because Parker and Hemingway are dead, and here I am talking about them, because Dorothy Parker had a way with words, and Ernest Hemingway wrote Standing Up. I'm in a black box theater in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1,500 miles away from home, in the middle of a story, one of the emotional highlights of my show, when Soft Cell's 1981 hit, Tainted Love, sometimes I feel I've got to run away, I've got to get away from the pain you drive, comes wafting out of the sound booth, leaving me stunned and confused. Now, it's performance number 3 of my 5 at the Minnesota Fringe Festival, and after my first 2 shows drew crowds of 5 and 8, respectively, I'm thrilled to have 25 people who've come out to see me on a hot summer night. Now, I pulled them in, several guys off Scruff, a gay dating app, a former housemate who moved out to the Midwest and who brought her boyfriend, her teenage son, and his girlfriend. Several locals I enticed with free day passes to the festival, and several others who came through the festival website when 5 of the 8 people at my second show posted 5-star reviews. Now, it's early in my performance, and I'm doing a piece called What a Fellowship, about my visit to my godmother's Black Baptist church back in my hometown of Cleveland. See, I was back in Cleveland on vacation when my godmother, Donna, asked me if I would take her to a memorial service for her son, Lonnie, who had died a few years earlier. Since Lonnie was a member of the little church where Donna is a mother or senior member, the service was doubling as a fundraiser for the building fund. So the next day, I'm sitting at the church, the only white person in the sanctuary, a gay Jew, when the minister calls me up to speak, introducing me as Donna's other son, who's come all the way from Boston to be here for Mother Donna. Well, I went from pink to crimson, wondering how Donna's grown grandchildren, the children of her real son, would feel about that introduction. But knowing how much Donna loved Lonnie, how could I say no? Well, after I gave my little speech, I sat back down in my pew and felt sweat trickle down my armpits and roll down my back. Then the minister threw open the floor for other testimonies, and I waited for Lonnie's grown children to share. But for a full minute, which felt like an hour, there was only silence, while I mumbled epithets, cursing myself for being the only speaker. Now, I wanted my Minnesota audience to feel the weight of that silence, the awkwardness of that moment. But instead of silence, Tainted Love comes rolling out of the sound booth, while Mark, the professional technician provided by the festival, sits oblivious, playing with his phone, unaware that the audio track, which is supposed to run between each of my pieces, but not during them, is rolling along. And if I, a hard of hearing man, can hear it, so can my audience. I mutter, seethe, and finally turn to my left and say, "Turn off the music, we can hear it." Then I jump back into character, or try to, explaining that though Lonnie's children didn't share, one of his cousins did, and the family was fine with my little eulogy. Now, at the end of that piece, as the lights go down, I'm supposed to sing the chorus of a gospel song that came to me, called Jesus is My Flashlight. It came to me in the shower. I'm a gay Jew, I don't know. But it goes like this. Jesus is my flashlight, Jesus is my guiding light. When I'm alone in the dark of night, Jesus says gonna be all right. But just as I open my mouth to sing, Tainted Love comes back again, drowning out my ending. Now, at the end of the next story, the lights go down as scheduled, but the little blue light upstage, which I need to find my props and my clothes, is nowhere to be found while I stumble around in the darkness searching for my pants. By now, I am royally pissed. I lose one line and then another as I wonder what's coming next. Maybe this is payback. You see, a few days earlier at my technical rehearsal, Mark said that I was supposed to wait outside the theater until he came and let me in, and then I'd have about 10 minutes to set up before my audience was seated. But the show before mine finished half an hour early, so I quietly walked in to get down to the basement where my props are stored. Well, when I walked in, Mark yelled out, "We're not open yet!" from the sound booth. Evidently, I'd broken protocol by walking through early, and he wanted me to wait outside the building in the parking lot. Well, this seemed crazy to me, especially on a rainy night, but I apologized, and then I was off doing the show for those 25 people until Mark broke protocol by basically sleepwalking through my show. Well, after his last screw up, when I started to lose my lines, I told myself to get it together. I'd come too far and worked too hard to let a bored tech ruin my show. And I did pull it together. So the audience barely noticed my offstage drama. Well, at the end of the show, as I'm quickly packing up my things, Mark mumbled something like, "Gee, I don't know what happened with that music, but I'm leaving a note for the other tech." So fortunately, I was done with Mark, and my last two shows with the other tech went off without a hitch. But I'll never hear "Tainted Love," a song I used to love dearly, quite the same way. Why do I write? Because when I read books, I think, I could do this, and it's like a dare, and I'm stuck back again in my life because I do not write fiction in French like Hemingway, and I get depressed when I haven't written. Why do I write? Because I'm still alive, forming, performing, because I'm stubborn, breathing, greedy to grab more life, dick, air, because I want money but need connection, listeners, all ears on deck. So this is my life in middle age, but who am I kidding? At 60, I'm not in the middle of anything unless I live to be 120, but have tipped heavily to one side. The side of not quite old, but getting there, and how do I back up and turn this clown car around? Entering my 7th decade, I am older, as one of my friends reminded me on my birthday, than most houses, trees, and some towns. I'm trying not to think about that, but it's like a pirate radio station playing in my mind. I'm on a Mexican radio. So, how do I end this show without this one happy moment, this satisfying resolution when our hero, who would be me, conquers all? Anxiety, bad dates, self-doubt, all would be vanquished, slayed like St. George or his Jewish equivalent and the dragon. The audience would leave inspired, uplifted, buoyed by the triumph of the human spirit and all that. But back in my life, in the real world, I can only tell you the truth, since, like I told you before, I lack the imagination to make stuff up. I want to make the most out of the time I have left, to wring the life out of my remaining days like a dish rag, to leave something, a book, a story, or friends who remember me behind. I'm Judah, I'm 60, and I'm a writer. I have my CPAP, my mouthpiece, my eye wash. I have sleep apnea, dry eyes, and my dreams for a better life. Mouthpiece. No strips. Eye wash. CPAP.
mouthpiece, nose strips, eye wash, CPAP, mouthpiece, nose strips, eye wash, CPAP.